Go Blue, I'm Steve Dace, and welcome to another Instant Reaction. Ohio State 27, Michigan 9. The streak is over after 2,192 days. Ohio State finally has its first win over Michigan since Thanksgiving weekend 2019. That's how long ago it was because, of course, Michigan pulled off the greatest strategic retreat since Dunkirk in 2020 by not playing that game in the COVID year when Ohio State probably would have hung 100 on a really depleted Michigan team. Jimmy gets fired, and the next 3 years of magnificence likely never happens. So Michigan was right to retreat and not play that game. And Michigan was right to retreat in this game, to punt down 18 on fourth down, to just let the clock run, to not use the timeouts and let Ohio State just grind the clock there in the fourth quarter. And we're very fortunate that the snow did show up in the second half, frankly, because this would have been 2018, 2019 bad if we had a 50-degree day today. Everything I feared going into this game manifested. The reality is, and I kept saying this all week long, I just did not see one place. Overall, we are a better team than we were a year ago, but I just did not see one place where we were excellent and that we clearly had a matchup advantage like last year, when we knew we had a great defensive line. The rest of the team we did not think was very good. But we knew we had a great defensive line, and maybe in a one-game scenario, a great defensive line can wreck a game so much that you can drag them down into a mosh pit and pull one out. And that's what Michigan did. But this time, we don't have really an elite player or an elite position group really anywhere. We've got a lot of nice players, a lot of young players. We did start out running the football. If you watch the film breakdown that I shared on Friday from Connor Stallions on our X feed at Michigan Podcast, when he was talking about with pin and pull and gap scheme, Michigan ran those in the opening drive. I think 37 yards in the very first run for Jordan Marshall. So those things were working at first, but then Marshall got hurt early on. It was very clear he could not go. I have no idea why he got put back in the game when it was out of reach, just to take more hits made absolutely no sense to me. But when he went out of the game, it was over. And the truth of the matter is, if these two teams, as currently constructed, play 10 times, Ohio State's going to win 9. There just was nowhere on the field that Michigan could win the game. They were going to need Ohio State to make mistakes. And, hey, Julian saying through that early interception, so it looks like maybe they're going to have that. Then the rest of the game, there wasn't anything close, Noah, to pressure on him. The best unit on the field was the Ohio State offensive line. For the 24th consecutive year, the team that won the rushing battle won the game. Michigan had negative yards rushing in the second half. And then you saw really Michigan's biggest weakness the last 2 years, the passing game, really came into play here. There just really has not been great development of Bryce Underwood. I think if we're being honest, the best he looked was the first couple weeks of the year against Central Michigan and New Mexico. And there just hasn't been that one like takeoff game or he's clearly in command. They did not trust him in this setting. And then when they tried to trust him, he blinked. There were a couple of plays where there was no pressure at all. He did like this panicky dump off, and Andrew Marsh is wide open for a first down over the middle. That was really, if Michigan was going to even attempt to make it a game, that was really the last point in the game where they could have done that. There were other plays where guys were open, but it was clear and we saw this against Purdue. We saw this against Michigan State. If we're being really, really honest, I think now's the time for some honesty when you get your ass kicked like this. Bryce Underwood should not have played. He was not ready to be the starting quarterback at the University of Michigan. I think if we're just being honest. They just didn't have anybody else. And now I think maybe if Mikey Keene had not been injured, maybe this season I think plays out a lot differently at the quarterback position. The record's probably the same, but maybe I think Keene is probably the starter from the beginning, and then maybe as the season goes on, maybe Bryce overtakes him a little bit more like what you saw with JJ and Cade McNamara. But he just was not ready to lead a team this year. What did he say to the Big Ten Network back in August? You'd never seen a freshman quarterback like me. Well, it turns out we've seen a lot of freshman quarterbacks like this. I mean, this is pretty much what freshman quarterbacks look like. And just that extra year of development, man. I mean, the difference in taking a redshirt year for Julian Sayin compared to Bryce Underwood. Physically, Julian Sayin looks like his little brother out there. But once the ball is snapped, I mean, he looks like he's, a pro. And many times during this game, Bryce looked like a JV kid trying to make the varsity squad. It was kind of embarrassing, frankly.
Bryce did the same thing JJ did with the 9 stuff.
Yeah.
The second you say anything remotely corny, anything like that, as a quarterback, it's immediately going to be thrown back in your face, and you're just asking for trouble at that
Oh,
point.
you mean you've never seen a freshman quarterback like
yeah,
me comment?
100%. It's the same thing as the 9. It's the same exact thing.
Yeah,
you're
that's
just
going to
asking
get
for it at that point.
That's going to get memed all off season long. So listen, I looked at the clock. I just looked up and realized I went for 4.5 minutes. I didn't realize I talked that long, so I'm going to shut up. Your turn, my man. Go ahead.
No problem, man. No problem. You probably have a lot more to say than I do. I'm kind of at a loss for words, but really, it's just like I'm not 100% surprised after watching what I've seen all season from the maturity. I don't even remember exactly what I said last week, but it was really like the team that wins the rushing attack and the team that makes the least mistakes, and that was really just the case. Even though they had more penalties called on them, that was really the case. I think culture-wise, maturity-wise, toughness-wise, even though this team is young, you can tell there's a vast difference than there was from the 21 to the 23 year.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's that big of a gap from then to now with the entire team, the biggest change you got to look at is the coaching staff. And I think that's one of the biggest issues. Because if your entire team lacks maturity and your entire team is struggling, that's not just your team sucks. Like you said, they're talented, they're good and nice players. You can win plenty of games, even against the number 1 team in the country, with just a lot of good and nice players. And the thing is, we did have a great standout player, and that was Justice Haynes. So I was feeling a lot better when you had that news yesterday about him potentially coming back in, but then you saw the availability report come in and he was out, and then you were like, well, now I don't know what to think. And then immediately Jordan Marshall goes out too in the first quarter, and then that was kind of it. As good as Bryson Cuzdall is, and as much as I like him, that's a walk-on. You can't win a game with a walk-on unless your name's Davis Warren. And then Davis Warren didn't win the game last year. He threw 2 picks.
He tried to lose it, actually.
He tried, yeah. But the thing is, every single year, you're not going to have Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and you can't rely on them and then a field goal kicker to beat Ohio State every single year. You need to have an actual functioning offense. You need to have better depth. You have better maturity. You need to have better fundamentals, and you need to coach better. That's the biggest thing. You just need to coach better. That's. I think this game did not feel as close as it looked on the scoreboard.
Correct.
But it should have been. Like, it should have been. Despite how talented they are, especially in comparison to us, it should have been closer. And that just ultimately comes down to a lack of maturity and a lack of coaching. Like, there's really no reason, and you can't blame the refs either. When you lose by 18 points, that was by rule. It's a finicky rule. It was a touchback by rule. You lost by 18 points. Okay, they called that back. Somehow you get a stop. You lose by 11 anyways. That doesn't decide the game. It's stupid. Shut up about it. Don't complain. Don't make excuses. We're not them the past 4 years. So I really just overall disappointed. Not super duper surprised. I thought this was likely as a worst case scenario, but I expected it to an extent, but just very disappointed overall.
So to me, I think the game, and I think what I said at halftime pretty much just plays into what you took out of this game. We're too young, all right? And we don't recruit at their level. I mean, we recruit at a 5% level. We recruit better than 95% of the teams in college football. They recruit better than 99% of the teams in college football. So, we don't need a lot of development to beat 8 teams on our schedule every year. But to win the games we want to win the most around here, we do need some development. You see what I'm trying to say, to close the gap, And so, because we're not recruiting at the Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon level, and I would say that those are the teams in the 1%, maybe Texas in there too. And so we would be in that next level, that 5%. Our guys just, the amount of young people we're playing there. I mean, and then the amount of guys in this game that went into the injury tent all game long. I mean, every time someone made a play, it felt like they went into the injury tent, And so I just got injury PTSD from Michigan and the Lions over the last 2 years. I mean, they need to really be looking at their training staffs, just systemic levels of injury problems. But when you're as depleted as we are and as young as we are, it's just not your year. And sometimes it's just not your year. And I think knowing what we know now, if we go back to August and we say, guys, Bryson Cuzdall is going to get the most carries against Ohio State. Bryce Underwood's not even going to throw 10 touchdown passes for the season. If I tell you that in August, Noah, what do you think our record is? 5-7, 6-6?
Probably the same as last year.
Yeah, just kind of barely lucky to get bowl eligible. So I actually think they did a hell of a job getting us to 9-2 with this roster. And I say that acknowledging that it's also largely a byproduct of the schedule that we played. All right. The easiness of that schedule was offset by the amount of youth and depth we had to go with because of all the injuries and everything we had this year as well. So we just got outclassed. And the question then becomes, what now moving forward? We're likely headed to the Citrus Bowl, and Michigan hasn't been there in a few years, and we're going to be the highest ranked team eligible for that game. So that's likely where we're going to head. USC, as part of the old Pac-12, they'll be ranked higher than us next week in the playoff rankings. We'll each have 3 losses, but they beat us head-to-head. But they're still part of the Pac-12's old original bowl allotment, so they will not factor into the Citrus Bowl. So we are likely going to the Citrus Bowl on December 30th. If I had to guess, that'll be probably against Texas, maybe Vanderbilt out of the SEC. Whatever's the highest-ranked SEC team that doesn't make the playoff, I'm guessing they're going to pit them against us on December the 30th. Who knows? The transfer portal has been pushed back this year now, so it's going to be after the bowl game in January. We do have signing day next week, so who knows who's going to play, who's not. But the number one priority for this program is whatever it did to develop Bryce Underwood this year. When you consider Bryce was there for 15 bowl practices, all of winter conditioning, 15 spring practices, all of training camp, and then took every meaningful snap for this program this year. When the finished product of all of that development is what we saw out there on the field today, that's when we go into the portal here in a few weeks to try to get receivers, rival schools that we're competing with for the Ryan Grants and Ryan Wingos or any other names you want to throw in there are going to negative recruit the hell out of us with that. Whatever we did to try to develop Bryce going back to last December for this moment, do the opposite starting tomorrow, because that is the number one priority in this program. If you fix that, then some of the other deficiencies we have in a matchup like this, it helps to alleviate a lot of those concerns. It gives you the proverbial puncher's chance because you've got the playmaking quarterback. We have to fix that. I mean, Bryce looked lost. There were several games this year, and I don't blame the kid for blinking in this environment against Ohio State. You got a walk-on tailback, right? Who knows if you trust your weapons? He's not the first Michigan quarterback to blink against Ohio State. Chad Henne's as good a quarterback that's ever played here. I watched him blink against Ohio State 3 times, right? And then the only time he didn't, we still lost when they were the number 1 team in the country. I've watched great Michigan players blink against Ohio State several times. But my man blinked against Purdue, blinked against a terrible Michigan State team, one of the worst Michigan State teams in the last 40 years. Those were the games, brother, where he should have been putting up the numbers that made us think he was coming along. And then you show up in a game like this against this defense and get a reality check.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
And something I want to say is, despite what I said about the coaching staff, when you have a quarterback out there that's 6'5", you got Donovan McCulley wide open down there. Then he lazily checks it off to Andrew Marsh, somehow misses that and it's an incompletion. Play calling was awful. That's not on Chip Lindsey. That's not on Sherrone Moore. Plays like that. There are moments where it is on Chip Lindsey and Sherrone Moore. There are moments where it's on Bryce Underwood. There are moments where it's on both. And I feel like a lot of today was just on both.
I agree.
And I feel like, obviously, I don't want Bryce to leave. I'd want him to improve. Hopefully that improvement you hope to see over the season, you see in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously, I want him to succeed, but I would like to see a change. If it's the same, it's just those 3 pieces there. Bryce Underwood, Chip Lindsey, and Sherrone Moore. Next season, one of them will not be here. I feel like. That's just how I feel. Because I feel like, or it's just unlikely that all 3 of those are going to drastically improve and then everything's going to be different, everything's going to be better next year. Because those things just don't just happen out of the blue. I'd like for them to be able to stick with it. I'd like for it to improve. I just feel like, honestly, it won't. I don't really know what else to say. If you don't see an improvement from week 1 to now, who's to say you are? How much are you going to week 1 next year against Western Michigan? Like, how much? How much do you really expect? Especially if you don't, like you said, if you don't change that. If everything you've done all the way up to this point, throughout all of winter last year, all of summer, all of spring, all of fall, if nothing has improved drastically, why is it going to magically do it this offseason? That's just the thing I'm concerned about.
And there's another factor here that is kind of new as a dynamic. We've never, you kind of knew SEC guys for decades were getting paid under the table, probably, 40, 50 grand here, 100 grand here, you know what I'm saying? But no one really had an idea how much money guys like that were making. Now, though, we do. And everybody knows what Michigan supposedly or allegedly paid in the market this time last year to bring Bryce in. We really don't have a precedent for what that does in terms of a player's development. There's just never been anything like this in college football. And maybe it'll be nothing, But in the NFL, we see guys all the time under the weight of being a high draft pick and all that money. Think about, and this would be before your time, but before they went to the current rookie wage scale in the collective bargaining agreement, when Sam Bradford and all these quarterbacks were getting, Dante Culpepper and Jamarcus Russell were getting $50, $100 million deals coming right out of college. None of those guys developed, by the way. The one guy who did was Matt Stafford. Almost all the other quarterbacks in that era, Achilles Smith, all those guys, a lot of them folded, crumpled under the weight of those expectations. And I do think we have to consider, I don't know Bryce Underwood enough to say that we watched any of that, but I do think you have to add that into your calculus as an X factor moving forward, because we just don't know what that does. We don't know what that does to a psyche. We don't know what that does to a team dynamic. We just don't know. College football has never been played like this. But I know this, it doesn't make it easier. However hard it is already to be the starting quarterback at the University of Michigan, it doesn't make it easier that everybody knows they essentially wrote a blank check to try to get you to come here. All right, that doesn't make it any easier. Who knows if it makes it too hard? I don't know that. I do know, though, it doesn't make it easier. So he's the franchise right now. Sharon Moore's tenure as Michigan head coach is directly linked to the success of Bryce Underwood. If they develop him, then they have the ability for Sharon to coach here for a long time, because that kid has number one pick in the draft kind of potential. But if they don't, and next year will be a big year to tell us that. I think moving forward at a school like Michigan, no one will get away with missing the playoff 3 years in a row. I think that's just automatic, instant. You're out of here. It'll be like the NFL. You miss the playoffs in the NFL 3 years in a row. I don't care who you are, you're gone. All right. And I think the same thing's going to happen in college football, particularly with teams thinking I can, with the transfer portal, get better quicker, and I don't have to sit here and wait for 4 or 5 years for you to build a team. So I think next year is a crucial season for Sharon, and all of it is. I mean, listen, they could go out and get, a great edge defender in the transfer portal, or a guy like Nate Marshall sitting in the program was a big-time recruit last year, could develop into that guy a year from now. But if they don't fix what we saw at quarterback, none of that's going to matter. All right, schedule is too hard now. You're not going to be able to man ball this thing all the time. Next year, we've got Oregon, Oklahoma, Penn State, Indiana, and Ohio State. That's half the schedule next year. That's half of the schedule next year. All right. And then you're hoping that Iowa's not really good because they're on the schedule, or Michigan State doesn't take a big leap in a rivalry game because they're on the schedule. All right. So those 5 games next year are treacherous. And there's just no way. There's no way you can physically dominate teams in this era of college football anymore without having a real hopeful playmaker at quarterback. And it's been 2 years in a row now that Michigan has not had that. All right. And so next year is the year that I think they've got to demonstrate they can develop him, Noah.
I think you can't smash if you can't motivate and lead men. I think the most important part of doing that is the first step. That's to motivate, and that is to lead. I think if you're trying to be their best friend, even if the players like you, that doesn't mean you're a great head coach. If they like you too much, that might be actually kind of a bad thing, if you think about it, just based off my experience coaching. Like my high school coach, I loved him. He was a great guy. I could always go into his room and talk to him about something if I needed to. Awesome dude. But when we stepped onto the field, he was yelling, he was screaming, he was motivating us. Like I wanted to play for this guy, right? Like I said, play is a strong word to use for my high school football experience. But I wanted to play for him because he motivated me. I can't really see Sharon Moore doing that. I don't know if it's different behind the scenes, but just from what I see from him, he seems like a soft-spoken, kind of awkward guy, and not really like in a Jim Harbaugh way. Like it's in a completely different way. And I mean, I'd like for it to change. I'd like for it to improve. I don't want to see anybody fail. I don't want anybody just not to succeed, anything like that. But I'd want for it to succeed. I want to see them improve. But if your head coach can't lead men like that, and your quarterback is an 18-year-old with all the pressure on your shoulders, the pressure of the world on your shoulders, like what are you going to expect? Like you're not really going to get much out of that. And I just think that it just needs to improve. It just needs to, or someone's got to go. Multiple people have to go if it doesn't, to be honest with you. And I really don't know. I mean, you'll see week week 5 next year, I think you'll see where the trajectory of this program is going to be in the next few years. Honestly, I think it's just a lot of uncertainty, and I feel the exact same way, kind of up and down. And then right now, I feel the exact same way that I did at the beginning of the season, with how unsure I am of Sharon Moore and how nervous I am to have an 18-year-old quarterback starting. I feel the exact same way because there hasn't been that improvement that you expect to see. And I think the improvement of the record is different because although Bryce Underwood struggled, he's still better than Davis Warren, obviously. So you see improvement at the most important position, and you have an easier schedule, so you're going to get a better record. That's just the
Yeah, I would argue that last year's team probably with this schedule is 9-3, 8-4, probably.
Yeah,
same quarterback, everything. Nothing's changed. I would argue last year's team with this year's schedule is probably 9-3, 8-4, like this year's team.
I totally agree. And if that is that's the biggest difference, there is just the two most important people you have on the field and then off the field, and that's the quarterback and the head coach. And if both of those are struggling, and if both of those aren't on the same page, you're going to lose football games, especially against the number 1 team in the country.
Yep.
And I think with how bad they performed, getting out of there only losing by 18 is pretty lucky if you think about it, just based on that. And anything I said isn't necessarily an excuse. It's a fault. You know what I'm saying? I'm not making excuses for anybody because there is no excuse. There is no excuse to at least make this game close with how tough and physical the culture is at Michigan. But if you lose that culture, you're not Michigan anymore. You're a team called Michigan, but you're not the Michigan. So I don't want to hear any smash stuff. I don't want to hear any you've never seen a freshman like me. I don't want to see any of that. I just want to see tough physical Michigan football like it used to be. And I feel like that is not something where you need the most talented roster in the world to do. You don't need that. You don't need 5 stars at every position. As much as I like Bryce Underwood and I want him to succeed, you don't need to pay a guy $12 million to be a successful head coach at the University of Michigan. If you actually want him to smash, that's up to you. Mm-hmm. You need to hire a better strength and conditioning staff. You need to hire better play callers, or when you get those play callers, get out of their way and let them do their jobs, and don't take too much control over the program. And you need to do a better job. That's just the fact of the matter. You need to do a better job. You got lucky last year because you have Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. And even though Ohio State fans would like to say that they ran the ball too much, but would they have like the second most passing attempts in their whole 2024 season against us? Mm-hmm. So you're just get lucky that you have a really good defense. You have a very good experienced defense. You get 2 interceptions off Will Howard, who's probably concussed after that hit from Makari Page. Yep. Most likely concussed after that. And that was the defense's game. And you have a great kicker. You have a great kicker in Zavada last year. And really, you just can't rely on that. If you're relying just on 2 guys and a kicker, you're going to lose the next year. And that's what happened. So that's really all I have to say. And I really am not sure how to feel going into next year. Because, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, how much I want to see a bowl game win, but like how much does a bowl game matter now?
Yeah.
Because who's playing in that bowl game?
We even know who's playing for either team. No clue.
How much?
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying.
Like one thing we don't know now is with the transfer portal in January, how many guys that want to go in the portal for a big payday just don't play in the bowl game. There's all kinds of rumors about Ryan Wingo of Texas hopping into the portal for money. Maybe he doesn't. If we get Texas in the Citrus Bowl, maybe he sits out rather than risking an injury before he can go into the portal to get a bigger payday. You see, these are just things we don't know. Okay. What I do know is, for those of you that balked at what I said a few minutes ago, if you trade Oregon and Indiana from last year's schedule for Maryland and Purdue on this year's schedule, last year's team is winning those 2 games. So yeah, roughly the same schedule as last year's team, just an easier schedule this year. So at Michigan, it's not about the record, and this is what Penn State fans that were frustrated with James Franklin understood. The way if you have a competent coach at Michigan and Penn State, with the baseline level of recruiting, you're going to win 75% of your games because you're just going to have better material than the rest of those, than 75% of your opponents. You're really not getting paid to win those games. You're getting paid to win the other 25% of the games. That's what you're there to do, right? So it's not going 9-3. That's the issue. Like next year with that schedule, I think 9-3 I could definitely see. But if they beat Oregon or beat Ohio State but lose a couple of the games, you and I are maybe having a different conversation with that 9-3 next year than we're having with this year's. You see what I'm saying? And so at a school like Michigan, you're not necessarily getting paid to have a great record as much as to win the games that matter the most, right? And this year's team with the exception of beating the worst Michigan State team since George Perlis first took over 40 years before you were born. This year's team lost all of the most important games on the schedule. And frankly, in 3 of them, Oklahoma, USC, and Ohio State, was just never really competitive whatsoever. And the quarterback devolved into primordial ooze and looked like he should not be on the field. And he looked like a completely immature freshman running around with his head cut off and not operate the offense at even a basic level in all 3 of those games.
And frankly, this might be irrelevant at this point. But let's just look at a hypothetical scenario here. We probably shouldn't, but let's look at it. Let's say week 2 you schedule a MAC school instead of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
This team's, and you win that game, obviously. This team's looking at 10-2, and you might actually be in the playoffs. With how deep the conferences are, why would you schedule
I totally agree with
an
that.
SEC team like that at their place that early in the year?
Hey, if Oklahoma,
why would you do
if
that?
Texas plays Ohio University instead of Ohio State, and they've got wins over Vanderbilt and some of the wins they had in Texas A&M, they're in the playoff at 10-2 for sure. I mean, the committee told us for the last 3 weeks that it didn't care that Notre Dame lost to Miami. Well, then why should Miami have even played that game? Miami should have played North Dakota as an ND instead of Notre Dame and be 11-1, and then we wouldn't be having this conversation they'd be in, right? And so I don't really know what the incentive is to play those non-conference games.
I understand it gives you better TV viewership.
So what?
You get better views when you play Michigan and Oklahoma versus Michigan and Miami of Ohio, obviously. But I mean, frankly, I'd rather get my team get less views and win games.
Correct. So would every fan, so would every coach, and so would every athletic director.
That's just how I believe, frankly. Yeah. I don't really get that. I mean, at least you play Oklahoma at Michigan next year, but still, like, scheduling those games, the only team where I feel like a team that's tough like that, where I'd be like, I'd be fine with scheduling that in the non-conference consistently is Notre Dame, just because.
I hate playing Notre Dame. I totally disagree with you on that.
Well, I mean, I just winning live rivalry games, but if
I just don't want to help them at all. To me, if they want to play us, join the Big Ten. But I hear what you're saying. There's a famous rivalry there.
You've had a lot more experience with that rivalry than I have. I wasn't as serious about football last time we even played them 6 years ago in 2019, where we went by 30, 40 points. But maybe that's just because that's my most recent experience with that rivalry.
Fair.
Maybe not. I don't. But the point is, though, you schedule Miami of Ohio, North Dakota, like you said, instead of Oklahoma. We're sitting at 10-2, and we might be in the playoffs. So why schedule Oklahoma?
Yeah, I don't see why there's an incentive for any team in any power conference to play Notre Dame or any major non-conference opponent where they ding you for losing it, but give you but you don't even get credit all the time for winning it. I just don't see what it helps.
And there's nothing to prove by winning it, because in the Big Ten there's no lack of ranked teams to beat.
Correct.
Especially on our schedule for 26 and 27. There's going to be no lack of.
I don't see how did beating Michigan help Oklahoma? If Oklahoma had played Western Michigan and still beat Alabama and finished 10-2 out of the SEC, they'd still be in the playoff, right? Yeah. They'd still be in the playoff. And so I don't really know why even play these kind of non-conference games at all. But that's a whole other show and a whole other topic.
That doesn't excuse what happened today as well. There's no excuse there. You still have to win today to get in the playoffs, and that's just. I mean, like I said, it's probably irrelevant right now. It's just something I've kind of had on my mind all season. I think there's no better time when we're ranting right now to bring that up. I think, honestly, but I mean, I really don't get the point of doing that. And I understand the NCAA's point in doing that. I don't understand Michigan's point in doing that.
Well, speaking of pointless things, a season where you went 9-3, you lost all your most important games. Your only real win that fans care about was against the worst Michigan State team in 40 years. And frankly, you kind of tried to choke that game away at the end, and you tried to give the ball to your star freshman quarterback, and he puckered like crazy, so he had to take the ball out of his hands, just run the clock out. It feels now that you have the ultimate clarifier in the game that a lot of this was kind of a pointless season. And the number one objective of this season, in my view, given our youth and inexperience, was not accomplished, and that was developing Bryce Underwood. And I think after seeing where he is at, we cannot take for granted now that he's going to be some superstar quarterback. The traits are there. But the traits have been there with lots of guys, including guys here. Joe Milton had traits. Now, Bryce's high school career is way ahead of Milton's, okay? But given that, there should have been a way bigger step by him. I mean, I'm not asking him to carry us against Ohio State. We could not even rely on him against Ohio State. The coaches clearly did not trust him on any level at all. And that, to me, is the biggest story of the entire season.
At the beginning of the season,
I'll give you the last word.
What do we expect? because I know we talked about it a little bit. I don't remember if that was with you or if that was with Aaron, but I kind of just expected 2021 Cade McNamara kind of stats. And I feel like
now that looks all Big Ten compared to what we
right,
actually got.
I feel like that's how it should have been, and I think just what you got was a little bit disappointing. And at the beginning of the season, I think a lot of people were very open and willing to blame that all on the play calling, especially the beginning of the season. The play calling was not all there, but you can't put all of that just on the people that aren't on the field. Sometimes it comes down to the people that are on the field, and I think it kind of did.
Mm-hmm.
I think today came out, like I said, I think it came down to both, but I think just overall in the season, like Chip Lindsey's not out there throwing interceptions. Like Bryce didn't throw that many interceptions, but still at the same time, Chip Lindsey's
no, Chip Lindsey's not with a completely clean pocket doing a sidearm dump off on 3rd and 8 when the best receiver was actually schemed open by Chip Lindsey. Andrew Marsh is wide the bleep open on a square in 15 yards down the field. And instead of looking at him, Bryce just can't get rid of the ball quick enough. There's no scheming around that.
And we can go back and look at the film for the whole season, brings up plenty of times where it was just a bad play call and it was on Chip Lindsey. Those moments like that just aren't, though. They aren't, and you just have to see that improve. And I mean, if the quarterback's not developing, you could say if the quarterback's not developing that much, it could also be on the coaching staff.
Sure.
Throughout the season.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, that's just kind of a decision-making thing. And that's just kind of an awareness thing that you need to work on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on one or the other. It can be on both, and both can have to improve. And I think both do have to improve if you want to see any kind of success next year. Because if you show up, and then even if you only show a little bit of improvement or no improvement next year, we're probably losing 5 games next year with our schedule. If you show up week 1, the same exact team, go throughout the season, we're losing 5 games. If it's the exact same, and obviously it won't be, it shouldn't be. But like, how much progress are you going to see if the coaching staff can't progress you over the course of a season? I don't know.
I think that's a fair question, given what we saw and didn't see
I don't
for the last 12 months. All right. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. And, of course, we'll have another episode of Michigan Podcast to break it all down even further later this week here on the channel. Other than that, we'll see you at the Citrus Bowl. Go Blue.